Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, if how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Foreign Policy Review. I am Dustin Pickering, your honest and noble host, and today we have a guest star, Billy Bob, and CARLO Parcelli, my co-host. We're going to be discussing the Western media narrative and the Ukrainian shitfest going on right now with Russia as well as the United States and what's happening there. So without further ado, let's get into the discussion, guys. So let's start with Billy Bob. What is your take on what's going on?
Well, it's totally different from the narrative that we hear in the media. I think the driving force behind what's going on right now is, of course, NATO's eastward expansion and their encroachment, right up to Russia's borders. So, Russia has recently, created a solid economy and a powerful military, and they're kind of just done with, being run over and having their legitimate security concerns, disregarded by the West. So, over the past 8 years since the coup in Ukraine that installed the current government, there's been, disputed territories in eastern Ukraine and also in Crimea. Of course, Crimea voted to join the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation accepted them as part of the Russian Federation. Eastern Ukraine in the Donbass region, they have declared their own independence in 2014, and they've been Russia has helped them defend themselves from Kiev's attempt to violently enforce their sovereignty in that region. So what we see today and yesterday is just Russia saying, hey, enough is enough, West. We're not going to just sit back and allow you run roughshod over our legitimate security concerns. So, I mean, that's basically, how I see things. And I think, you're not going to hear that in the media. You're just not going to hear that perspective in the media. And I think that's one of the most important issues that people ought to think about. They ought to think about why the media, just shoves one particular narrative down everybody's throat. And that'll help them, come to a better understanding of, the reality of the situation and, basically why things are as they are, because there's so much misinformation. There's so many narratives out there. People get confused on what's going on, what's happening and why. And I think, events like we're seeing today and yesterday help us to see more clearly exactly what's going on. But the media again exists to confuse people and to keep them from properly perceiving reality, basically.
there seems to be sort of a hegemony of views, and I mean, I don't see much of a difference as far as the mainstream media. It seems like it's there to just, serve as the arm of the government. It's like, the fourth estate's really just a the bastion of it's supposed to be the bastion of democracy, but it's really, there's so much, other than the internet and the blogs and whatnot, the mainstream narratives are all very alike. That we need to be involved in this, and I'm just curious, what is the motive behind this Ukrainian issue? I mean, what kind of involvement? What is the U.S.'s interest exactly? I mean, what do you guys think?
Well, there's such gaps in the media. U.S. interest. The U.S. interest is to sell weaponry, to contain Russian power. They want to destabilize Europe, continue to destabilize Europe, like they did with Brexit. That's been a long-standing plan for going back to the Project for the New American Century, to destabilize their buddies in Europe. Lord knows the 2008 international derivatives collapse aided that. In the mainstream media, they never mention the influence of the Nazis. It's about 100,000 Nazis in Ukraine are now controlling foreign policy in that country. Zelensky can't do a goddamn thing because if he does, first of all, he's Jewish. First of all, if he gets out of line, just like Poroshenko couldn't do anything, they'll off him. They'll drag him out in the streets, just like they did Najibullah in Afghanistan, and murder him. So he can't really negotiate. And the thing that surprises me so much, well, it doesn't surprise me. What am I talking about? Is how much the United States is allied with these Nazis, from top to bottom, from Steve Bannon at the bottom to Congress at the top. Congress keeps arming Ukraine. Lockheed stock has gone through the roof, and at the same time, they kind of put in there, don't arm the Nazis, but you can't arm the Nazis. Then they do nothing about it because the Nazis have all the arms. They're the ones that have been shelling Donbass for 8 years. All of this is missing from the Western media. All of it. I have spent the last 2 days arguing with the hoi polloi because that's the only people that'll talk to me. I've been blocked by several of the propagandists, the more substantial propagandists from Ukraine or who are supporting Ukraine. But I've been arguing with the American public, and I do this all the time. I'm always interested in the comment sections of different newspapers and online services. And what I've understood is what the U.S. media has done is they've created a group of a population of absolute morons. I mean, know nothing, the most stupid people on the planet. Edward Bernays has achieved what Chomsky and Herman called manufacturing consent, and it's thorough. It's so ingrained. I have gotten the most stupid remarks. And what I like about now, as opposed to trying to do this 35 years ago, all I have to do is Google something and send 15 articles refuting or educating these people or trying to educate them, and wait for the death threats to roll in. So, oh, you call me, I'm going to kill you. What is that? But the ignorance of the American people is non-pareil. There's nothing like it in the rest of the world. And I communicate now with the rest of the world. I communicate with people in Africa on a daily basis. They know far more about world affairs than the average American. And they don't have the advantages that Chomsky points out that Americans have. Americans are smothered in material goods. They're a bunch of fucking idiots. and they're supporting Nazis, and apparently they don't even know it. Well, we could talk about Nazis later on because I got something to say further about them.
That kind of broad question. What
what's happening?
What is the role of uranium in this? Does anybody have any thoughts on that? Because Ukraine is one of the, has some of the most strongest uranium reserves. Is there any economic interest in the Ukrainian episode here, or is there, from the perspective of foreign policy and U.S. involvement?
Well, go ahead, Billy.
I mean, I can't be for sure. I mean, obviously, the West wants Ukraine in their sphere of influence. Any resources in Ukraine, the West wants to exploit. But what they really are after also, what Carlo didn't mention, he mentioned a bunch of other things, but, is the oil and gas in Russia. So when Putin came in, Yeltsin had privatized the entire oil and gas sector. And Putin ran on a platform of renationalizing it and using those two huge industries to stabilize the Russian economy and to benefit the Russian people. So that put him in the crosshairs of Wall Street, because Wall Street, of course, your resources have to benefit us and not your people. And if you don't allow us to do that, then you're going to be our enemy and we're going to get you out. So that's one of the big things. As far as uranium in Ukraine, I'm sure, the West would like to exploit it. I will mention that Zelensky very recently was talking provocatively about building his own nuclear weapons. And so that, again, was a very provocative act that Russia just has no need to tolerate that because they are no longer a weak and broken economic, mess. They're a strong country. And so, I think the West has just pushed a little bit too far, and now there's some pushback. And I don't think it's really even that big of a deal. I think Putin, of course, the West is going to say, well, this is just the beginning. Putin's going to try and roll on Berlin. All kinds of nonsense like that is what we're going to hear. But no, I mean, it's his immediate security concerns. The U.S. would have acted with far, far, far less restraint if Russia had overthrown a government in Mexico or Canada, put in an anti-U.S. government, outlawed the English language in, say, Mexico, and started, launching mortars every day in Texas. Like, do you think the U.S. would put up with that? I mean, it's a joke.
It's ludicrous.
So, honestly, the uranium in Ukraine, I don't think it's a decisive factor, but it's definitely something, the West was hoping to exploit, and Russia definitely is not going to tolerate it, being exploited, to attack Russia. They're not going to stand for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, well, I mean, and I essentially, I kind of agree with that. Let me just address a couple of things. First of all, I agree. What right does the U.S. have to criticize anyone when they've murdered tens of millions of people around the world in their imperialist wars since World War II? I mean, 5 million in Southeast Asia, with 3 million more as collateral damage by destroying the water tables and infrastructure of Laos, Vietnam, Cambodia, parts of Thailand. Okay? I mean, that's just one. And you've got Syria. You've got Iraq. There's another 1 million people in Syria, 2 million in Iraq. That's right there. Right there, that's 10 million people. So, fuck the U.S.
Yeah.
Okay, second point, the uranium. Eric Draitser, he put out a thing. He laid it into this guy who innocently put a list of Ukrainian natural resources, which is it's rich in natural resources. And Draitser has to go, and he's with Counterpunch. And Draitser had to go and say, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. Basically, I'm pulling rank on you. I know more than you do. So I wasn't going to have that. I mean, I think there is something to it. Now, whether or not, I think Zelensky's blowing it out his ass because he's not a nuclear engineer. He's a comedian. So he doesn't know the expense that is involved in building a nuclear weapon. And besides, Westinghouse will sell him for probably $10 a bomb, if they can make a profit. So why should he go through all the trouble of building his own weaponry when, every U.S. company in the world would, and French company in the world for that matter, would be absolutely delighted to sell him nuclear weapons, tactical, whatever. So I don't really see that, but I do think that natural resources in Ukraine matter to a large extent. Because they always matter. Um, uh, and the Nord Stream, and I want to say something about the Nord Stream pipeline. Now, it's not this latest postponement on the part of Germany is just corresponds to the date in which the ratification was supposed to go through, several months down the road, 2-3 months down the road. So there's really no change. I mean, there was no expectation on the part of the Russians that the pipeline would be ratified by the German Parliament or the EU, like today. There was no expectation of that. So, but the United States wants to block the Nord Stream pipeline for several reasons, and one of them is it will help to destabilize, to weaken Germany, to weaken their allies in Europe, because they've had a long-standing plan to weaken. When the European Union was announced, the U.S. was stone cold against it, and they still are. So they've created all of these methods for weakening Europe. So if you're going to weaken your best buddies on the planet, what the fuck are you going to do to your worst enemies? And that's what scares me.
Absolutely. It is the whole world's already falling apart, it seems, and it's just kind of, this is just adding to the fuel to the fire, these tensions that are escalating, and the Biden administration and his response. I mean, what do you guys think of the general prospect here of war? I mean, is there going to be a war? I mean, what's going on with this? These tensions. What is the criteria here?
I don't think either side wants to go to war. I mean, they're both nuclear armed powers. A war, isn't in anybody's interests. But having said that, the U.S. is definitely not going to be happy. The West is not going to be happy with what Russia's doing. And Russia might not be done. We don't know what, the extent of what their pushback is going to be for the last several decades of Western aggression. So, I mean, it's definitely a possibility. Carlo was touching on the issue about the Nord Stream 2. I think what needs to be brought out in the analysis, it's we fall into a certain, I think, wrong kind of thinking when we analyze things as far as national interests, because nations are composed of classes, and there's two classes of people. In the West, it's the capitalist class that calls the shots and decides policy, and typically the policies that they decide upon are good for themselves, and the people that sacrifice are the working class. So I think the capitalist class in Europe isn't going to sacrifice if Nord Stream 2 is canceled, and it benefits their interest to cancel it, but it's the working class that are going to be the ones sacrificing. And so I think this class dynamic shouldn't be overlooked, because it's intrinsic to everything that goes on. So I just thought I would bring that out. I thought about it while you were talking, Carlo. But I mean, it's a super relevant paradigm with which to view things.
I think so too, because when I was reading about the Ukraine back when in 2016, I believe, I remember reading that one of the causes of the conflict was that Ukraine owed Russia for gas and oil. And then you had the EU was saying, well, we'll pay off the debt if you come to our side. And Russia was saying, well, we'll forgive if you come to us. And so that was one of the causes of conflict there back in 2016, I believe. And so what are your thoughts on that sort of like that economic interest there, Billy Bob?
Yeah, well, certainly there was a coup. So, Ukraine had the legitimate Yanukovych government that was democratically elected. They were in 2013, they were having to decide between East or West. Putin was more than happy that if Ukraine did both. Honestly, I could get into that in more detail, but it was the West that was demanding Yanukovych pick, and weren't going to allow him to sign both agreements. And so, what precipitated and what allowed them to go ahead with the coup was basically Yanukovych decided not to go with the West at that moment, and then that was the excuse that was used to launch the Maidan and the Western coup attempt. Did you have another question, Dustin? Was that?
I think that covers it, because I'm curious about what is causing some of these conflicts of interest. I mean, I think you had a good perspective on that when you were saying that the balance of power there was that there was pressure from the West on the Ukrainian government to make an ultimate decision of absolutes, and they were willing to negotiate between the two powers. And so I want to see what Carlo seems to see. He wants to say something, so let's let Carlo talk.
The wild card in all of this, it's one word: Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
Don't minimize the way they control Ukrainian policy now. They're terrorizing the country. They're the ones on the front lines shelling Donbass, the Lugansk and Donetsk.
Yeah.
They're the ones. And they go way back. The Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, and I call them the Organization of Ukrainian Nazis, goes back to 1928. They fought on the Stepan Bandera and his Nazis and other organized Nazi groups fought against the Soviets. The Soviets lost 25 to 35 million people in World War II. So when I hear people go, the Soviets are fascists, I go, what? Well, you're an idiot. So, but the thing is, the Nazis. I first encountered the OUN when I was doing a community access TV show, and they were out of northern New York State. People brought over an Operation Paperclip and all that, and they were supporting Reagan. They were supporting, and I'm going, wow, these guys are real Nazis. These are genuine anti-Semites. These are genuine racists. These are people that will kill Jews at the drop of a hat. And they're supporting Ronald Reagan for president, and he was elected. That's my introduction to them. I'll tell you one story. I was with a friend of mine, Rosie and I, and he's gay, and we were down at the Quilt when it was on the mall, the AIDS Quilt. And we were doing a documentary for community access television. And I had my camera, and I'm filming these quilts, and we had a nice day together that was very, very sad, especially for our friend. And we went and we sat across from where the quilts were at the art museum across the street, and I could see another demonstration going on. So I got this camera. I go over there. Well, it's the OUN, and they're having a demonstration, and they're putting up Nazi salutes. So I pull out my camera and I start filming. Well, suddenly I've got people standing in front of me to block my filming. Then I got people trying to grab the camera. Then I got people shoving me. So I ran the fuck out of there. So I go back across the street. I'm a little shaken up. I'm not a big guy. And I'm in a group of like several hundred of these Nazis. They're literal Nazis. They're people that will kill Jews, kill people of color at the drop of a hat. And they're in control of Ukraine. I can't make this any clearer. So I sit back with my friend Bob Starkey and my wife, and I'm sitting there, and these two starkers, these two huge guys, sit on a bench directly across the street. So we're ready to leave. So we say goodbye to Bob, And Rosie and I walked to the subway. Well, they followed us to the subway. So we get down on the platform, and we're in the subway, and they're on the other end of the car. I tell Rosalie, humor me. We're going to jump off this stop, and then when I say jump back on, you jump back on. So we jumped off, we jumped back on, and they jumped off, and they got hung up on the platform, and we got away. That's the fuckers I'm talking about. And they will kill anybody that the Nazis wanted to have killed. They will kill people who have deformities. They will kill gypsies. They will kill Jews, and they will kill people of color. I'm not kidding. So when I hear, and let me just get into this while I'm at it. When I hear everybody from Glenn Greenwald to Steve Bannon to Pierre Trudeau to Joe Biden, and when I see them in photo ops with these very same Nazis, when I see Max Blumenthal laugh about showing Pierre Trudeau with this Nazi who then goes, and then he has another picture of the Nazi doing the Nazi salute at a speech he gave, I have to fucking laugh, you know, because here's stupid Max Blumenthal backing the truckers who are supporting. Here's a list of the people who are behind the financing of the truckers. Scaife, Mercer, Thiel, Koch, and Sig. All of them. If they have sort of libertarian dimensions to them, but they all are in it for the money, and they all support authoritarian movements and principles. So you've got that for the money end of it. And so you've got and they're playing right into Steve Bannon's playbook. I force myself to listen to some of Steve Bannon's podcasts. He has 1,800,000 listeners, and to tell you the truth, you know, that's the subterfuge is coming from. Why the fuck would you want to back people from Charlottesville or the truckers or whatever if they're not only anti-vax, but they're anti-socialist, they're anti-communist, they're anti-BLM, they're anti-union, they're anti-immigrants, they're anti-environment, they're anti-LGBTQ, they're anti-gun control. Why the fuck would you go and say, look, we have to protect their right to free speech? Fuck you. They don't have any rights of free speech, and the left doesn't have any say in any of this because it's a war between two right-wing entities, the neoliberals represented by Joe Biden and Pierre Trudeau, and the Nazis represented by Steve Bannon and the wealthy people I just mentioned. So it infuriates me to hear Greenwald, to hear Taibbi to a certain extent, and to hear especially Max Blumenthal, and to hear a guy who admits he's an ignorant fool, Jimmy Dore, and another guy who is by all measures an ignorant fool, like Joe Rogan, go on about anti-vaxxers. They're not anti-vaxxers. They're Nazis. And you know how I know that? Because the MMA people in the mixed martial arts community who are very close to Joe Rogan, they're all over his show and everything. They actually not have only gone to meet the Ukrainian Nazis, the very Ukrainian Nazis I'm talking about, but many of them have joined the ranks of the Azov Battalion. So, fuck this. It's very dangerous to back these Bannon. Bannon is so easily fooled. Blumenthal, Taibbi, and Greenwald. He's made suckers of them, and he kind of implies that in his radio show that it's been so easy because these people have these kind of rigid notions of imaginary free speech and free action, which have never existed. Jesus Christ, if I wanted to go to grade school, I had to have all kinds of vaccinations, or they weren't going to let me into grade school. So I have a driver's license. You know, I don't really even get into the stupidity of that argument. Not to mention people like Jimmy Dore practicing medicine without a license. He should be jailed for that. I mean, I hate to say that, but I would be if I went to my neighbor and, you know, or my neighbor came to me and said, "Look, I'm really sick here." I said, "Well, you know, I've got this remedy for you here, or let me perform the operation. I'll do the appendectomy for a fraction of what they'll charge you in the hospital." I'd be arrested. That's basically what Jimmy Dore is doing. That's basically what Joe Rogan is doing. I just wanted to get that out. I mean, the Nazis are not only in Ukraine and influencing policy there, but they're here. They infiltrated deeply into the OUN infiltrated deeply into the Canadian Parliament. I mean, they're here.
That's true.
And,
you know,
and I think that's what's driving a lot of this aggression against Russia. I mean, and in Ukraine they're a loose cannon. I mean, they could start World War III.
Yeah, for
happily.
sure. The MO of the West, of the United States and Western Europe, is to utilize and wield as weapons the most intolerant radical forces. So, for instance, they have for a very long time invested and proliferated this very intolerant perversion of Islam, Wahhabism. There's other names for it. And they love to proliferate that intolerance and then utilize those people that believe it to further their imperial interests. So we see intolerant jihadists in the Middle East. We see death squads and narco terrorists in Central and South America, which you know a lot about, Carlo.
Yeah.
In Europe, they use Nazis. It's not we. I shouldn't say we. The U.S. uses Nazis in Europe. So Nazis, narco terrorists, death squads, intolerant, radical Islamist head choppers. So those are the tools that the empire uses to further its interests and to destabilize and destroy. And that's what they're good at. It's so much harder to build and to develop and to build peace and prosperity. But the U.S. doesn't even try. The West doesn't even try because their interests lie in maintaining control for themselves and for their class. So, it's absolutely right that Nazis have been empowered in Ukraine. And, when it benefits them, of course, they'll put the kibosh on the Nazis. When it benefits their interests, and they'll talk bad about them. But when it benefits their interest to do the opposite, they'll do the opposite. They'll give them all the arms they want. They'll unleash them.
Right. We'll take a brief break, but we'll be right back.
Okay.
Brief break. Thank you so much for watching today's Foreign Policy Review. We'll take a brief break and we'll be right back. Are you curious about financial literacy? Then take a look at Professor Anthony Rivecchio's new program on Parrot TV. It's called Financial Focus University. This is an excellent program to learn about questions related to your own finances post-COVID, if how you can manage your money, how you can work with your tax situation. And this is an excellent and informative discussion of financial literacy. With Professor Anthony Rivecchio, your financial problems will be solved at Parrot TV with Financial Focus University. Do you know that there is a publishing company that wants to make life easier for you as a writer? This publishing company is called World Inkers Printing and Publishing. We publish in all different languages, and we're looking for writers of all genres, all formats. We're looking for scholars, ghostwriters, playwrights, poets, short fiction, novelists, you name it. We're looking for anybody who is interested in writing and the craft of writing to be in touch with us. You can reach us at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. With World Inkers Printing and Publishing, you do not require a lot of money to publish with us. Contact us today at info.worldinkers@gmail.com. Become a winner with other authors at World Inkers Printing and Publishing. Give us a shot. We will surely finish you. Welcome back to the Foreign Policy Review. We have me, Dustin Pickering, Carlo Parcelli, and today's special guest, Billy Bob, on the show. We're talking about Ukraine, the Western narratives, and some of the foundations of this dispute and this conflict. So, Billy Bob, what were you saying before the break there? Did you have a chance to finish up what you were talking about?
Yeah, I was making the point. I was trying to dovetail off what Carlo was saying about, the Nazis and how they've been empowered in Ukraine, and how, there's a very fine line between, liberalism and fascism. And I think, as liberalism begins to feel threatened, they definitely don't think twice about embracing fascism and empowering those kind of fascist elements. Carlo's opinion on the domestic policy and the commentators that he brought up, Jimmy Dore, Greenwald, that's a tough issue. It is very divisive. Personally, I don't feel exactly the same way how Carlo does. I'm sympathetic to it. I understand where he's coming from on that. But it's tough to navigate all these things. And I know it's very polarizing because, and so I see good people on both sides, and it's tough for me to just, throw everybody under the bus and just give them a big label. And I'm not saying Carlo's doing that, in general, but I see both sides. I see Carlo's point of view, but then I also see people who are disenchanted with the capitalist class that rules in the West, the dictatorship that governs the United States. Like, they don't have a lot of legitimacy. And so when they try and do things like get everybody to wear masks or take a vaccine, I understand the skepticism, because our government has never shown that they really care about the health of people. So why all of a sudden? So I understand the suspicion. I'm not saying I agree with it, but I mean, I understand, and I'm sympathetic to it. And,
the suspicion, definitely. I mean, that's a good. I'm glad you brought that up about there being, the good on both sides. I mean, obviously, we're not talking about the good of the Nazis. That's
right.
Totally different thing. I was like, not
no.
But
no.
yeah, but I understand. That you're saying basically, Carlo, saying
no,
Nazis.
You're wrong. I'm saying it's wrong. Listen, I've been around a long time. I know that used to be what's been done is that, like we talked about, Dustin, the left narrative has been co-opted by the Bannons of the world. That's all they've done. It's just all rhetoric. These people don't care about vaccinations and not trusting them. They don't care about rat's rectum about it. And the people who are denying it, that who say that they're just suspicious of it, just 2 years ago, they were going for their third tour in Afghanistan. Fuck, they don't have a brain in their fucking head. They don't know what the fuck they're talking about. They're being manipulated. So what I'm saying is the fact that not only are these stupid idiots who make up the American population being manipulated, but now you've got Glenn Greenwald and Max Blumenthal being manipulated. I can understand Jimmy Dore. He's late to the show. He didn't know squat 5 years ago, 6 years ago. And Joe Rogan doesn't know squat now. I mean, he's an idiot. But these people, they're not committed to any of this. They're not. It's not government suspicion or all that. It's not Tuskegee Institute time for them. They're not black. They're racist. They don't like blacks. So this is their new racism, basically. Wow, we've been told by Fox News and the other two stupid right-wing programs and a bunch of disingenuous congressmen and Steve Bannon that this is the enemy, and that's what we want to believe, because these people, they might say vaccine, but they mean black man. They might say vaccine, but they mean immigrant. They might say vaccine, but they mean union. They might, that's what it is. Vaccine has become the new word for every fascist Nazi fantasy that every white American has held in his heart forever. And that's what it's all about. It's not about vaccines. They don't know shit about vaccines. Read their comments, which I do. You can wear yourself out trying to counter their comments every day. They're idiots.
Is it healthy?
At the end is they threaten to kill you because they see you as a communist.
Right.
I
was going to say,
Billy Bob play. You want to see a real communist there over there? I was going to Billy Bob. He's a real
solidify what Billy Bob was saying.
She's a real communist. Listen, I want to say one other thing about Afghanistan and in relationship to Billy Bob's analysis of the way, wonderful analysis of the way the U.S. uses right wing. The U.S. Formed Charlie Wilson and all that crap. They formed the Mujahideen. That was their deal. That morphed into Al Qaeda. That morphed into ISIS and ISIL and all these other groups. Well, all I hear from people is, "Oh, in Afghanistan, we were treated so badly." Well, I ask them, then why the fuck did the United States allow the Afghanis to slaughter Najibullah? And Najibullah was for women's rights, and Carmel too is his predecessor. They were for women's rights. They were Soviet. They were in favor with the Soviets, and they were for complete women's rights. I mean, women's rights like you get in New York now. Those kind of women's rights. You know, whatever the movement is, the Me Too movement. They were for Me Too before there was a fucking Me Too. Yet, what did the United States do? They formed the Mujahideen, who dragged Najibullah out of his house and burned him alive. That's how much the United States respects women's rights. You fucking idiots out there. So this notion that these people give a rat's rectum about anti-vax or all that's bullshit. That's window dressing. And the fact that, and it's just shocking to me, that somebody as intelligent as Max Blumenthal, who just lives a few blocks from me, would have that fucking notion in his fucking head. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. How gullible. It makes him sound like a 3-year-old. It's embarrassing.
Is it so much the vaccines and as you say, or is it skepticism of government policy and skepticism of just the general environment right now?
No, it's their bigotry. It's their biases. It's bigotry. They're not skeptical of government. Don't mess with my Social Security. These people can't even make that distinction. In Kentucky, they when Obama's whatever that plan was, Obamacare, they couldn't call it Obamacare because Kentuckians wouldn't vote for it. But then they changed the name to some innocuous thing, and then everybody voted for it, and they all love it, and they don't want to take it away. Well, it's just Obamacare. They just changed the name. They didn't change one word, not one word in the agreement. So these people aren't committed, not smart enough to be skeptical. Skepticism takes some knowledge of something. They don't have any knowledge. They're just bigots. They're just bigots. If it helps them, that's fine. If it helps black people, no fucking way. If it helps immigrants, no fucking way. That's what it's down to. And to be suckered in, Bannon is laughing. Listen to Bannon's podcast. He laughs at the situation. He finds it funny because he's been able to turn the narrative so easily. That's what I wanted to say today. That's what I've been thinking about all week. That's what's on my mind. And that's why I think we might have another world war, because the Nazis can't be controlled by anyone in Ukraine, and the United States powers that be don't give a rat's rectum if millions of Europeans on the Russian side, on the European side, die. They don't give a rat's rectum. That plays right in their hands. They can have another Bretton Woods. Oh, hell. They completely destroyed themselves let's go over there and be the preeminent power. That's what frightens me. And they have the tool to do it. And those fucking 100,000 Nazis in Ukraine that they cultivated since at least after the war. I didn't get into the history of it, which I intended to, but since they've been working with the OUN for literally before the Dulles brothers. Before the Dulles brothers were striking deals with the Nazis. So don't get me started.
Well, how do you respond, Billy Bob, to Carlo's critique of what you said?
Again, I understand where he's coming from. I don't agree completely. I think the American public, they are hopeless. I shouldn't say hopelessly indoctrinated, because I think, if conditions were different, they would be okay. But I think the conditions with which, they're forced to deal with regards to the propaganda apparatus, the total control of all the platforms of mass communication being owned and tightly controlled by billionaires with an agenda. And that agenda is to divide, to confuse, to mislead, to placate, the working class. And, when you're up against that, it's understandable that you're going to have a lot of confusion and a lot of ignorance and a lot of stupidity. But again, whose interest does that serve? So yeah, Americans are ignorant. But, you can kind of understand why when you think of, the propaganda war that has been launched against them by the ruling class. So as far as war, war, I think that the Soviet military can handle the Nazis that have been empowered in Ukraine. I'm not concerned that that's going to spill over into Western Europe. I think the media is going to pretend that that's a huge risk and huge concern, but Russia is responding. They're responding to provocations from the West, and the West is in control because they can end the provocations and there will be immediately no problem. So it's totally up to the West. And I don't think the West is suicidal. They know that Russia has nuclear weapons. They're gonna try a war of attrition that's going to go on for decades. It's going to be a new Cold War. And, they're going to do what they do best, which is, subversion and infiltration and sabotage of economies and industries. And, they're going to just pull out the old Cold War playbook. And that's what I think they're going to gear up to do over the next few decades. The difference is China and Russia know better than to split apart like they did in, the 60s. And I think, you're going to see a new anti-imperialist bloc that's going to be powerful and have learned its lessons from the Cold War era. And they're going to offer the world a better alternative. It's not going to be exploitation and domination. It's going to be peace through mutual prosperity. That's what China's good at. That's what Russia's going to be, signing up to. And I'm optimistic. There's going to be a new paradigm, I hope. Western hegemonic rule over the globe is coming to an end. And there's not a lot they can do about it. And what we're seeing today and yesterday is that, taking shape. So, we can be hopeful.
I think it's good to have hope and respective ideals. And I think, there's a lot of, I like your analysis quite a bit. I'm wondering what, in the last 10 minutes or so, what Carlo thinks of the future will hold with the Ukrainian conflict.
Well, I don't see it as bright as Billy Bob does. Rosalie asked me this morning if she thought that someone affiliated with the far right in Ukraine would sabotage Nord Stream 2. And I thought about that, and where it's located between the Scandinavian, Finland and Scandinavian countries underwater in Northern Europe, and traveling down to Germany, and that's it. That's in the offing. But I have to say, look at it globally. The U.S. is still all over the world. It's just meddling and subverting Chinese attempting to subvert the Chinese Belt and Road program. I mean, they ran 5 coups, well, 4.5 coups across Sahel. Now, what's interesting is that it backfired in Mali. They ran their 3rd coup in like 3 years, but then the Russians moved in, actually using their what is that group called? It's mercenaries like Blackwater, the Wagner Group, and they moved some of their special forces in, but they most moved the Wagner Group in, and the Mali people love the Russians. They're just happy, very happy to have them there, and this has got to be driving the U.S. crazy. But then the U.S. is also, I mean, they're arming the Tigray because the Tigray lost elections in Ethiopia, and now they're making Ethiopia a mess, and they made Sudan a mess, and now they have South Sudan. And, it's like the U.S. is just they're indefatigable when it comes to destabilizing the world. And as Billy Bob pointed out, Central America, I cut my teeth broadcasting against Domisan and the death squads in El Salvador and the Contras and the White Hand in Guatemala. And then we had in 2009, we had a U.S. sponsored coup in Honduras, which drove the country not only into poverty, but the murder of tens of thousands, not tens of thousands, but hundreds of environmentalists and journalists and so on and so forth. So the U.S. is still active around the world, but I do think that the Nazis have to be dealt with, and I think there has to be someone on the other side of the aisle dealing with them. I don't know. I don't know. I probably can't really answer your question. I'm not good at predicting the future. Honestly, I tend to be like Aaron Mate. I tend to see it like, well, there's not going to be war. There's not going to be an invasion. And I can remember back at the first invasion of Iraq, I was sitting with a friend of mine, and I said, I don't think they will invade. And he's much more worldly than I am. And he said, well, if they've amassed all these troops, they're going to use them. And he was right. He was right. It's very simple. And I should have realized that the situation was going to escalate in Ukraine. So when it comes to predicting, I'm not very good at it. I can deal with the past.
So I've been taking heat this morning. A lot of people are accusing me of getting it wrong and suggesting that there wasn't going to be an invasion. And I don't think that's fair criticism. I think there was definitely a media hype, and they kept on saying the invasion was imminent, and they've been saying that for years. So I would make fun of that, right? I would make fun of the breaking news that hey, Russia's going to invade. Because I mean, it's been weeks now, but even before that, it's been months, just not at that crescendo of a level. So so when they did invade, I have a lot of people say, that post didn't age well, but yeah, so and I didn't see, of course, like Carlo, I didn't see an invasion happening yesterday. That took me by surprise a bit. I assumed they would just go into the Donbass region and just protect it and defend it. They had other plans, but yeah, I'm not sure any of us ever suggested that Russia would not use their military in greater Crimea. It was always an option. The Western media was saying it was imminent for months, and we would laugh at that because they were wrong over and over. But yeah, it's tough to be a prophet.
Yeah, I just also, and it's not really a full scale invasion. I mean, and frankly, we primarily have just Western journalists showing us puffs of smoke coming from several miles distance to
So what I definitely do not think is going to happen is a Russian occupation of Ukraine. So I have been clear that is not what Putin is interested in doing. and I stand by that analysis. Whatever happens, he's taking out command and control centers. What he's doing is demilitarizing. He is demilitarizing Ukraine. That was one of the objectives. And so he's going after, military targets, and he's going to render them impotent and non-threatening to Russia and the eastern Ukraine. That's what he's doing, and he's not going to be there for long. He doesn't want to occupy it. He knows that that's not going to work out. So, that's been my consistent analysis, and I stand by that. I would be very surprised if that analysis turns out to be wrong. And, I'm honest. I will admit I was wrong. But I can't see that happening. He knows better than to do that. So right now it's a demilitarization. It's a military action, and it's temporary. It's not going to be. I don't think he's going to put in a government. I don't think he's going to put in a pro-Russian government. He might help facilitate a change in leadership there. They might drag Zelensky into the streets. They might. Yeah, and they meaning the Nazis.
Nazis, yes.
So he's definitely not safe. What comes after him remains to be seen. Russia could definitely, contribute a helpful role in facilitating the development of a sane, competent government that isn't just a Western puppet or a Nazi puppet. And they might do that, but they're definitely not going to impose some Russian, leader and try and have an occupation of Ukraine. So that's just off the cards, in my opinion.
So we have about a remaining 3.5 minutes of the program. So as we spoke, I think what we're saying initially, we were talking about the hegemony of the Western media and how it monopolizes the narratives, at least in our own minds. And I think that we've kind of, without stating it, we've come to the conclusion that, generally people are good. And I don't think we want a war. No one wants a war, and these aggressive powers that are trying to manufacture one are really the based on this class interest, as we spoke of earlier of the Western class structures and, the power elites that are in charge of things. And so I think that, generally people are not, we don't want war. Most of us don't want a war. We don't want any kind of aggression. And I think that all the powers that are involved are trying to negotiate something, but we need to figure out, you disagree? Well,
yeah, because you come to Washington. I'll take you around the Beltway.
Well, I know there's a lot of
all the Beltway bandits. I'll point out the Raytheon headquarters and the Lockheed headquarters and the Boeing headquarters and the Westinghouse headquarters. They all want war. They want
absolutely.
war.
And those are part of the that's the class.
They have all the power. They have thousands of lobbyists. The Ukraine currently has more lobbyists in Washington than Saudi Arabia. That's a fact. That's how big business is in that part of the world. And all those people, they're paycheck patriots. They want war. They're telling congressmen every day in their ear, look, there's a couple of $100,000 in it for you if you go to war.
Yeah, I never understood the money motive myself.
Along with Hunter Biden, you can have a piece of Burisma if you vote for war. That's happening right now, and we're just sitting here battling. Yeah, and that's what's going on.
Right.
So
there's not much we can do, and I think that's the problem, is that the general population does not have any real say in anything.
Absolutely not. That's the way the founding fathers set it up, so you wouldn't have any say. Just read Edmund Burke.
Right.
You're too stupid. and they are too stupid. People are too stupid.
We need to get into
we tell ourselves it's a democracy, but really it's a class dictatorship. So we're totally disenfranchised, politically disenfranchised. We have no say over the decision-making process. And people ought to realize that, and people ought to recognize that, what motivates the policies is the class interests of the elites, and the working class interests do not even enter into it. And they're gonna design policies that we have to sacrifice for that benefit them. And that's the problem.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think that we definitely have a division of power. And I think I don't know what options we have in terms of empowering people and the general public, that the good guys, trying to get the good guys. I mean, I don't even know if they really want the power. They just want the good, We just want peace and prosperity, as we said earlier.
Oh, well, we do what we can. We speak out. We use your platform. Thank you for having us on your platform.
So I thank you both guys for being on the program today, and just again, Carlo, thank you for co-hosting, and thank you, Billy Bob, for joining us for this discussion. It's been an excellent, and interesting, informative discussion of the background of this conflict and the interest involved. So thank you so much, guys. This has been the Foreign Policy Review. I'm Dustin Pickering, and you guys out there have a great Uncle Jesse. Who was Uncle Jesse? Very strange. Thank you so much, guys. Have a great idea. Have a great day, everybody out there, and watch more Parrot TV.